There's orangutan in my bedroom and I don't know what to do. She plays with all my teddies and keeps borrowing my shoe. She destroys all of my houseplants and she keeps on shouting, ooh. She throws away my chocolate and she howls at my shampoo. There's orangutan in my bedroom and I don't want her to stay. So I told the naughty orangutan that she had to go away. Orangutan in my bedroom, just before you go, why were you in my bedroom? I really want to know. There's a human in my forest and I don't know what to do. He destroyed all of our trees for your food and your shampoo. There's a human in my forest and I don't know what to do. He took away my mother and I'm scared he'll take me too. There are humans in my forest and I don't know what to do. They're burning it for palm oil. So I thought I'd stay with you. Orangutan in my bedroom, now I do know what to do. I'll fight to save your home and I'll stop you feeling blue. I'll share your story far and wide so others can fight too. Orangutan in my bedroom, I swear it on the stars. The future's not yet written, but I'll make sure it is ours.
Noah? Larry, what the hell are you doing?
Larry!
Larry, you can't just... Oh.
Larry! Oh, are you all right? How did...
Larry! Righto, what's going on here?
Oh, sir, I'm arrested. Oh! Oh!
The Slap, Part 2.
Behind even the loveliest views of Britain's towns and cities, life is lived under a harsher light. 14 million people in the UK are in poverty, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. 4 million are children. And it is they, the UN Special Rapporteur Philip Alston, has come to see.
I'm a mother, I should be able to look after my family properly.
They've seen demand rise here by 20% in the past 6 months.
Hurry, drink. Good boy.
For Anita Holmes, it was a lifeline. With 3 children to feed and waiting for her first payment of the benefit Universal Credit, she ended up meeting Carol, a volunteer, after contacting the food bank online in the middle of the night. What made you contact the food bank at that time of night?
I'd sat and thought about it for about a week or something, and you've got pride, you know what I mean? You don't want to have to ask for help. I have nothing. Literally nothing. Couldn't get help from nowhere. Rang the dole. Nothing. Wouldn't give you advance payment. Not their problem. Go to the council. Kind of the council I've got now. There's just no help. No. If you lose your job and you go on universal credit, you're knackered. They just don't help you.
Anita and her children have to use the food bank once a month.
Tell them about Riley when he came to food bank and he got that pasta.
Oh, he was so excited, wasn't he? Yeah.
So he's 7?
Yeah, just little things, isn't it?
And then it's Carol, who's only come to support Anita, who begins to cry.
If you saw him, it's the most gorgeous little boy, and it was just his little face. You'd think it was Christmas morning and he had 3 pasta dishes in front of him.
And that's what he was delighted with?
Absolutely thrilled. And I just looked and I thought, is that all it takes to put a smile on your face? It shouldn't happen. He should, you know, that should be normal for him.
Why does it upset you so much?
It upsets me so much because I've been that close. And if it wasn't for my mum, my friends...
That's my master lifesaver.
But I never got to where it is, but it was days away.
Jaywick in Essex was also one of the stops on Professor Alston's tour. Twice deemed the most deprived neighbourhood in Britain. Just this month, a picture of the village used by Republican campaigners in the US as a vision of economic Armageddon. The council say things are improving, but there is a long list of needs here. And people were glad to make their case in front of the UN rapporteur in a packed meeting hall last night.
As soon as I moved into Jaywick, I was put into a bubble. I had lost friends and I was labelled Jaywick scum. Most of the time I was scared to tell people that I lived in Jaywick because people always stereotyped it as a place of nothing, a place of crime and a place of drugs. I couldn't even put Jaywick on my CV because I was scared of being turned away.
Then Erin, a former journalist married to an NHS manager, told how she had a brain hemorrhage, aged just 30.
I needed full-time care, as did my child. My husband was forced to give up work, and he became my full-time carer. I have been forced to live on virtually full-time bed rest for the last 10 years. Suddenly, we were not a middle-class, two-income household. We were living on disability benefits.
Now needing a private rented home, like many benefit claimants, she's finding landlords won't let to them.
I do not know where I will be putting my 12-year-old son to bed soon. And I can think of no other minority group that landlords are legally allowed to ban from their properties outright.
Tracy Whittenstall was one of the people who met Philip Alston when he was in Newcastle.
At one point they came to the house with an eviction notice. And at that point I was just like, do what you want. Yeah. Like, I've got nothing else to give.
Tracy, who lives with her 2 sons, says the problem with Universal Credit when she first transferred over left her waiting nearly 10 weeks for payment.
When people say, you know, I had nothing, there are those who just don't believe that it was nothing. They say, well, they don't mean nothing, but...
No, literally nothing. The payments I received were child benefit weekly, which was £34.40, and that's what we lived on for those 10 weeks. £34.40 a week for a family of 3. It was bread or bus fare. It was milk or bus fare. You know, I didn't have cups of tea because the little one wanted a glass of milk. That is, you'd never think that is how people would live, but that's what I live like. I was forced to live like that. I had no choice.
And how important do you think this mission by the UN rapporteur is? Do you think it's important?
I think it's very important. I think it's important for people like me that someone is fighting a little bit in your corner. I've said it all along that it's kind of just get on with it. It's someone else's problem. If you're hungry, go to a food bank. No one's that hungry. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Go and have a look.
The rapporteur will deliver his assessment on the extent of poverty at the end of the week. Whether the government agrees is another matter. Today, the Department for Work and Pensions said there are now 1 million fewer people living in absolute poverty compared with 2010, and that Universal Credit is supporting more people to get back into work.
Jackie Long with that report. Well, I'm joined now from Westminster by the Conservative MP Giles Watling, who is MP for Clacton, which includes Jaywick, that we saw in that report by Jackie. And with me here in the studio is Dalia Ben-Galim, Director of Policy at Gingerbread, a charity that supports single-parent families. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Giles Watling. Are you at all embarrassed that the UN rapporteur on poverty and human rights has felt it necessary to come to your constituency?
No, on the contrary, I'm delighted he came, and it was good to meet him yesterday and be able to put the positive case for Jaywick forwards. Because you have to remember that Jaywick is not a recent problem. It's been there since in between the war years, when it was built as a holiday village. And gradually it became used by other people as time went on. And it's been one, I admit, absolutely, it's been a thorn in our side for a long time, and there are problems there that need addressing.
Is there a positive case for Jaywick?
There's a very positive case for Jaywick, and as doubtless Professor Alston would have found, it has a very strong sense of community. The people there are amazing. It has the most beautiful beaches probably anywhere in the district, and it's on the up. The council's bought property and is building 10 more houses. It's bought 60 hectares of land, and there have been applications to build 4-storey flats which are flood-proof.
And yet, 14 million people living in poverty in this country, a third of them children. We're still the 6th largest economy. We have so many big social issues to deal with, and yet we seem to be paralysed by Brexit and therefore unable to deal with them.
Well, I don't think it's being paralysed by Brexit so much. I think there are issues. We've been through a period of great trauma when we had the big financial turndown in 2008, and we're pulling ourselves out of that. There is light at the end of the tunnel. But the whole point is we have to create the wealth, and if we can create the wealth, we can help these people.
Right.
And listening to that report, it is quite distressing, but we must reach out and help the people. We must create the safety net.
But we're also creating some of our own problems, or rather the government is universal credit, as we heard in that report, as we keep hearing, is actually contributing to poverty in this country.
Well, I don't agree. Universal credit it's a transition. And we went down to the job centre recently. DWP workers there are delighted with the way it works in Clacton, and they find it easier to administrate. And they say, on the whole, they have happy clients. But here's the issue. There have been glitches. That's admitted. It's being rolled out in Clacton now, and the government's injecting another £4.5 billion to make sure those glitches don't happen, and they shouldn't.
OK. Dalia Ben-Galim, you just heard what he had to say there, the MP for Clacton. Do you buy what he's saying?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that there's positive cases in some places. I mean, to say that universal credit is being plagued by glitches, I think is really problematic. What we hear at Gingerbread from single parents is it's not glitches and it's not the teething problems. We find a system where single parents are plunged into debt when they move on to universal credit, waiting a kind of minimum of 5 weeks. Childcare costs they need to pay up front. Many parents are too scared to move into work because the work that's on offer is low pay. It's precarious, it's 0-hour contracts, and so we find that real balance very difficult.
And the problem is we're dealing with the working poor, aren't we? A lot of these households have got jobs, they're just not paying enough money.
Absolutely. So for single parents, we're seeing record high employment rates, and a third of those families are living in poverty. It's 2018, that really shouldn't be the case when you're in work and doing everything the government expects for you, that your children are in poverty.
And yet unemployment is going down. Is it better to be poor or working poor?
Well, I think it's the quality of work. So I mean, neither of those situations are good. But I think...
But wages could at least go up.
I think, exactly. Wages can go up and the system can be better. The system can support families in a much more productive way and a much more constructive way. And at the moment, universal credit is undermining its objective of supporting single parents and many others into work. It's doing the opposite. Do
you think it was right for the UN rapporteur to come to this country to look at poverty? I mean, you know, there are plenty of other issues to be looking at around the world when it comes to poverty.
There are certainly plenty of other issues, but I think poverty is a real blind spot for many governments. I think poverty, in terms of, you know, you see a very high employment rate, you're right, but what you see underneath that is that the quality of work is poor and wages have stagnated.
Giles Watling, I mean, do you think it's right for the UN rapporteur to come to this country? I'm not just talking about your constituency, but to come to this country when he could be going to other parts of...
But going back to the point of universal credit, the whole point of universal credit is to taper out and help people back into work. There's nothing like having your own job, earning your own money, and the sense of satisfaction that gives you. We're helping people to get there, and that's a wonderful place to be.
And yet if you are working, if you have a job that pays you so little and is so precarious, that's not exactly an enviable position to be in, is it?
No, I absolutely agree. I spent 50 years as an actor, and I absolutely understand that situation. But having said that, I really think that the whole point is to help people into work, so people should not go without in order to get work. This whole thing of universal credit is to help people stand up on their own 2 feet and feel that pride that having a good job gives.
A debate for another day, I fear.
That's the problem, though, isn't it? That Parliament is going to have a voice on it. And if Theresa May can't get Boris Johnson on one side of the argument and Joe Johnson on the other to back her deal, then it's very difficult to see how she can get it through Parliament. So what should happen then? Should we have a no deal? Should we have a second referendum? Should we have an election? What's your take?
Forgive me, but you're doing exactly what I'm suggesting we don't do, which is to speculate on what might or might not be the case.
But it's important to look at those alternatives.
And the fact that we have different views on different parts of the party, it's so important that we recognise, and again the Prime Minister said this is the biggest decision that our nation will face in decades. It will require an element of compromise, not just from Britain and in the parties and in Parliament itself, but also with the European Union as well. But until we see the final document, until we see that the agreement that's put forward by the EU and by the Prime Minister, then we are guessing as to what might be the contents of that, and that is actually unhelpful at the moment.
In March, we proposed
Senior UK government sources are not optimistic about a Brexit deal being secured this week, meaning a November Brexit summit now looks very unlikely. No deal contingency plans will reportedly have to begin being put in place from Thursday. The prospects of a disastrous Brexit scenario look more likely than ever. One senior UK government official, when asked whether a Brexit deal is set to be agreed this week, said, quote, "I wouldn't go getting your hopes up." Business Insider reports even if a deal can be broken in the coming week, the difficulties of getting that deal through Parliament after the resignation of yet another Conservative minister on Friday look greater than ever.
Theresa May had been hoping to finalise a Brexit deal this week, but already her plans appear to be going awry. An emergency cabinet meeting that was planned for today has reportedly been cancelled because of the deadlock in negotiations. Well, let's go straight to London, where Vincent McAviney joins us for the latest on this. Good morning, Vincent. Another crucial week for the British Prime Minister. What are her prospects like this week?
Good morning, Belle. We say this at the start of every week, another key one for the British Prime Minister, but it really is now, because Theresa May had thought that a deal would be able to be put before the Cabinet at an emergency meeting on Saturday or today, but that has not happened due to an impasse with the EU. So there will be Cabinet tomorrow. The next 24 hours, she's hoping she can work through issues with the EU, particularly on fishing rights during the transition and then the backstop period, EU wanting to have their fishermen have access to British waters. The Prime Minister definitely not happy with that. And also who will have oversight of the mechanisms during the backstop period. The EU saying it should be the ECJ, but Theresa May knowing that'll be an incredibly hard sell for her own party. And it comes after a difficult weekend where the Prime Minister also lost one of her ministers, Jo Johnson. He is the brother of former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, and he's someone who, in a big letter and video statement he put out on Friday, said that this was going to be a huge mistake, comparing it to Suez and calling for people to once again have a vote on the Prime Minister's deal, the so-called people's vote or a second referendum. So a difficult start for the week for the Prime Minister. She's hoping that she can get these issues resolved quickly, because if there's any chance of another summit by the end of this month, it needs to be sorted in the next 48 hours.
Well, meanwhile, Vincent, Jo Johnson's brother Boris, former Foreign Secretary, has been wading into the debate again. Tell us a bit more about that.
That's right. Boris Johnson has once again used his Telegraph column to attack the Prime Minister, indeed calling for a mutiny in her cabinet, saying that the deal is capitulation. It's the same thing again of him saying the UK becomes a colony of the EU, using very loaded language like that. And it is thought that there are splits in the cabinet, as there have been throughout this process, but it is apparently a number of Remainers who are deeply unhappy, threatening to resign if we are heading towards the no-deal scenario. They would follow Jo Johnson, of course, as I mentioned, Boris's younger brother, on Friday, and sort of registering this. But it seems at the moment that the Prime Minister, even if she can get this deal agreed in the next 48 hours with the EU and give it to the Cabinet tomorrow, she's going to have a very hard time getting it on through Parliament.
The reality is that Parliament's gridlocked. It won't support the Prime Minister's deal. It also, though, won't support a no-deal outcome. I'm sure that that will be voted against by MPs. And what it underlines is that the only way we can really break that deadlock is to give that final choice back to the people. And the reality is there are now 3 different deals that will be on the table for the British public. The first deal is the one that we've already got from the EU. The second deal is the one that the Prime Minister's finishing off. The third deal is essentially to leave as planned, but on WTO basic trade rules, and then try and do a trade deal at some point quickly afterwards, however long that would take. Those are the 3 options. We should now put that choice to the British people and find out which of those they want us to take.
The British Prime Minister says she wants better relations with Moscow.
In the same speech, though, delivered in London, Theresa May described Russia as a global threat, adding that any improvement in ties is conditional.
We remain open to a different relationship, one where Russia desists from these attacks that undermine international treaties and international security. And we hope that the Russian state chooses to take this path. If it does, we will respond in kind.
This all comes against the backdrop of a year of degraded relations between the UK and Russia, especially in the wake of the incident in Salisbury, which saw Sergei Skripal, the former double agent, and his daughter Yulia poisoned with a substance thought to be Novichok. And of course, in the wake of that incident, the UK government laid the blame squarely at the feet of the Russian government, who in turn denied any involvement in it whatsoever and offered to help in the investigation, an offer which was rebuffed by UK authorities. And Theresa again repeating in the course of her speech that she held the Russian state responsible for what happened to the Skripals.
We could not turn a blind eye to the threats we faced. That as open economies and free societies, we needed to increase our collective resolve to tackle them, most pressingly those threats emanating from Russia.
Now, last year, Theresa May also gave a speech to the Lord Mayor's banquet. It's tradition for the Prime Minister to address the event every year, and on that occasion, she too took aim at Russia, although then she was accusing the Russian government of involvement in meddling and hacking into a number of elections in Western countries.
Sustained campaign of cyber espionage and disruption. This has included meddling in elections and hacking the Danish Ministry of Defence and the Bundestag, among many others. It is seeking to weaponise information.
Now, it remains to be seen whether this year's speech will result in better relations between the two countries. There are some who are sceptical and say that Theresa May's speech focused squarely on Russia and put the onus for a more open relationship on their shoulders and had no mention of issues of concern to Russia, like the ongoing expansion of NATO towards Russian borders, things like NATO troops taking shape and carrying out exercises in places like Poland. Until all of those concerns are also addressed, it's perhaps somewhat sceptical to think that this speech could lead to better relations between the two sides.
We discussed Theresa May's remarks with political analyst John White and UK Independence Party MEP David Coburn.
Reaching out to Russia was in the form of a mother berating a recalcitrant child, then promising said child that it will be forgiven if it was to change its ways. This is not the way to effect rapprochement with any country. And unless Western governments start to see the world through Russia's eyes and understand how Russia sees things, then there will be no meeting of minds, and this will just go into the box marked empty rhetoric. Western governments must start to learn sooner rather than later that they must also listen as well as speak.
We should be endeavouring to keep friendship with Russia and make sure that they behave more appropriately, perhaps, in the future, rather than make things more difficult. We should try and resolve these things quietly without shaking a big stick. We need to be more sensible in our dealings with Russia. We need to do trade with Russia, because that's the way to move forward. Quiet talking is probably better than shouting.
Can I just ask you, has the EU rejected Theresa May's deal?
The important thing is that there's two checks on this deal. There's Cabinet and there's Parliament. And so Cabinet's job is to put something to Parliament that is going to deliver on the referendum result. And we need to work together as a Cabinet to do that. And I'm going to be supporting the Prime Minister to get a good deal for this country.
What is Plan B?
In 1961, under the Tory premiership of Harold Macmillan, we applied to join the European Community. And he told the country at the time accession to the Treaty of Rome would not involve a one-sided surrender of sovereignty on our part, but a pooling of sovereignty by all concerned, mainly in economic and social fields. In renouncing some of our own sovereignty, we would receive in return a share of the sovereignty renounced by other members. 1961. Today, Brexiters are telling us that the country was misled into being told that this was an organisation just for free trade. Absolute nonsense. This was an organisation to try and achieve peace, and it was, even then, considered a political union of countries. We were not misled.
Messieurs, nous allons procéder à la signature des actes.
And then, in 1972, Tory Prime Minister Edward Heath signed the EEC Treaty of Accession following 6 days of debate in Parliament. And then we were in. 1st of January 1973. We had joined. And notice the headlines in the newspapers then, who in the main were all pro our being in the European community, unlike today. And then, in 1975, Prime Minister Harold Wilson, the Labour Prime Minister, decided to have a referendum similar to the one we had in 2016. Did Britain want to stay in the European community that we had only just joined a couple of years previously? And the question then was yes or no, do you think that we should stay in the European Economic Community? And at the time, the Labour government sent to every household, a bit similar to how David Cameron sent a pamphlet to every household. I think this one was a lot better. And actually it could have been printed today and there wouldn't have been much difference in it. And they sent this pamphlet and said that the first aims of the common market were to bring together the peoples of Europe, to raise living standards, and to maintain peace. Again, Brexiters say to us that we were misled in that 1975 referendum into thinking it was only about free trade. We were hoodwinked. It isn't true. The pamphlet also said that as a member, Britain has a say in the future economic and political development of the common market. And if we left the common market, Britain would no longer have any say. And at the time, the leader of the Conservative Party, the opposition, Margaret Thatcher, she agreed. And she said it's purely common sense to belong to a community working together in peace on economic and political issues that concern us all. Again, this is beyond just free trade. The result was overwhelming. Unlike in 2016, in 1975, UK voted to remain in the European community by a massive 2-1. The issue was settled. Although I have to add, that didn't stop Eurosceptics at the time wanting to campaign for us to get out, even though they tell us today we should stop. And I'll come on to that later on. The European community, now the European Union, has been a remarkable success story. It's grown from its original 6 members to 28, with more wanting to join. And it's achieved its original aim of peace between members, because never has a shot been fired between a European Union country. The remarkable success story. Look at it. I mean, if you read some of the newspapers, you think the European Union is collapsing. The European Union is the world's largest economic region, the world's largest trading bloc, the world's largest exporter and importer of manufactured goods and services, and the list goes on. And for most of the 40-odd years that Britain has been in the European Union, it's not been a problem. There's not been a general election issue. People were not against our membership of the European community, or as it became the European Union. It was on the periphery of the main parties. It was just one party, UKIP. The vast majority of Parliament supported our membership and our continued membership of the European Union. And why not? It was a success story and Britain was doing well. Before we joined the European community, we were known as the sick man of Europe. Our inflation and unemployment was high, and the countries of Europe were doing better than us. We wanted to join for the economic survival of our country because our empire was finished and our Commonwealth was severely diminished.
Today's Focus report takes us to Scotland, where a second independence referendum could be on the horizon. That in response to the UK voting to leave the European Union. The country's First Minister earlier this week said she remains determined to push ahead with the vote over the next couple of years, coinciding with the expected conclusion of the UK's Brexit negotiations. But a Scottish breakaway from Britain would need the green light from Prime Minister Theresa May. Contrary to the results of the first referendum in 2014, Scots are now more likely to vote in favour of independence, with many people fearing the impact Brexit will have on Scottish industries.
The Scottish Highlands, coastal towns like Ullapool, were built around one of Scotland's traditional resources, fishing. Last June, many fishermen who felt penalised by EU quotas voted to leave the European Union. James Stephen was one of them, but he fears that Brexit may not, in fact, turn out to be a good deal for the fishing industry.
In return for Britain to get a good Brexit deal, I could see the fishing rights maybe even being worse than they are at the moment.
A large part of Scotland's fish production is sold in Europe by exporters like Peter McCann. Along with 62% of fellow Scots, Peter voted to remain in the EU. On account of Brexit, he wants an independent Scotland.
The fishing industry in Scotland is best protected by Scotland, and with the context of Brexit, it definitely needs to be looked after by Scottish people, not those in London. You know, fishing isn't a priority for London or Westminster. Yeah, I welcome the fact there'll be a new referendum on independence.
Inverness, capital of the Highlands. Here, questions of identity are taken seriously. Scotland's nationalist First Minister wants a new referendum on independence to be held within 2 years. In pubs like Peter McCann's local, Scotland's political future is again the main topic of conversation.
I feel that with the information that we have now, in view of the last referendum, I will certainly vote yes.
But the UK is left stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're going to find it difficult going into the EU to negotiate their Brexit deal when the potential is that the UK will no longer exist as it does today.
Another traditional Scottish industry, whisky. The Glasgow distillery was created by Ian McDougall 3 years ago. Europe is the main export market for Ian, who believes that independence does make business sense.
The referendum on independence is inevitable. We really have no option here. We have to continue trade with Europe, and the only way we can do that is by being part of Europe and coming out of the UK.
Brexit has created a fundamental fault line that Scottish nationalists will exploit until they get what they want.
We set out in our manifesto that we would have the right to go back to the Scottish people and have a mandate if circumstances materially changed. Exit from the EU is a material change in circumstance, and I think it's quite right that Scottish people have their say of what kind of future they want.
According to opinion polls, Scotland is evenly divided on independence. When any new campaign starts, the Conservative and Labour parties will be on the no side, against independence.
The key thing is here, there is no guarantee, none at all, that an independent Scotland could actually become a member of the European Union. The European Commission has said this week that Scotland will have to make a fresh application as an accession state, and we know then that they will have to comply with the convergence criteria.
With a large deficit in public spending, Scotland would probably not meet the economic criteria required to rejoin the EU. But some sectors of the economy are growing fast. Edinburgh has become an alternative to the City of London for financial services. Joe DiRollo and his team have assessed risks for banks for 25 years. He believes that a new referendum would bring more uncertainty.
We obviously have very important relationships with England. Most of our customers are English. Will there be trade barriers with England? Will there be a different currency? Will it introduce currency risk for us? So all sorts of uncertainty.
A funds manager, David Sinclair, is also convinced that Scotland is stronger in the Union.
It was divisive last time. I think it could be worse this time around, especially if it's more emotional rather than based on economic arguments. I think the timing of the Brexit negotiations and the timing of the referendum will be crucial. If the referendum happens before the UK leaves the European Union, then it'd be quite difficult perhaps to make a rational decision if we don't know what Brexit will look like.
The British Prime Minister, Theresa May, is unlikely to bow down publicly to the pressure of Scottish nationalists and let them decide when the referendum will be held.
Right, let's take a closer look at this story by crossing to Keith Dixon, a professor of British civilization at Lyon 2 University. Professor Dixon, thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 today. Now, the Scottish government calling for a second independence referendum. Has it thrown a spanner in the works? What does this mean now for Britain's Conservative government?
Well, I think that what's happening here is that Nicola Sturgeon is introducing a greater dose of uncertainty into what is already a fairly uncertain situation for the British government. We don't know exactly what are going to be the contours of the Brexit deal. We don't know whether Theresa May is going to be listened to or not by her European partners. And the fact that the Scots are now, or at least the Scottish government is now considering a second referendum is obviously going to be a hindrance, an obstacle, much more than, I think, an irritation for Theresa May during the next 2 years.
Well, as you say, it would be a Scottish referendum would be counterproductive for May. It would perhaps weaken her position when it comes to sort of negotiating this divorce from the EU.
Well, obviously, she's going to be now entering these discussions, leading what is self-evidently now as a divided state, a divided British state. And this certainly cannot help her in what are going to be extremely difficult negotiations for her within Europe.
But Theresa May still has the upper hand. After all, she needs to give the green light for any sort of independence referendum to go ahead at the end of the day.
Yeah, of course, she does have the upper hand, but at the same time, she walks a very, very narrow path. If she uses that upper hand, as you say, too brutally, what might well happen is that part of Scottish political opinion, the undecided voters of the last referendum, may well turn against her if they feel that she's leaning too heavily on the democratically elected government of Scotland.
Meanwhile, what are Nicola Sturgeon's weaknesses when it comes to the issue of independence?
Well, I think her major difficulty is that it was already said during the 2014 referendum that this would be a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Scottish independence. Now, we're in a fairly short generation here with another referendum coming up. If the nationalists were to lose the referendum in 2 years' time, if the referendum does take place in 2 years' time, if they were to lose, then this would put Scottish independence off the agenda for a long, long period of time, I think. So it's make or break for Nicola Sturgeon, just as it is in many ways make or break for Theresa May.
Well, if it does go to another vote, Professor Dixon, do you believe that we will see the Scots break away from the UK? I mean, we have seen reports of an upsurge in support for independence, for Scottish independence.
Yeah. Yeah, as you know, I have no crystal ball, and it's going to be a very, very difficult call, I think, the next referendum. There has been an upsurge, historically speaking. There's been an upsurge of support for Scottish independence. Over the last 5 years, support has doubled in the opinion polls. But the two camps, for and against Scottish independence, are still very much neck and neck. So it will very much depend on how the supporters of independence handle their campaign over the next 2 years. And as I just said, I believe are walking a very narrow path. It's going to be a very difficult period for these two formidable politicians.
OK, Professor Dixon, thank you so much for your time and for your insight today. That was Professor Keith Dixon from Lyon 2 University.
French jam.
French jam, did you hear that? French
Won't
jam.
be able to afford it after Brexit.
From a Brexiteer.
You do know that that'll double in price now, don't you?
Yes.
Of course it won't. The import tax on that, you know, how much have you paid for that?
For the box.
Shut up, See, you're all just too negative.
Do you want to sharpen out?
No, just be positive.
I don't trust you with a sharp.
These people have said there's going to be visas. You have to have a visa to get into France next year. That's all we get because we go to France every year.
Yeah,
you
I'll get
realise
you some scissors. I'll get you
you
some
realise
scissors.
you'll need a visa? No. How do you know?
Yourself.
I just know, Kelly. You just know. I think largely the families very much were Remainers apart from Mum, so I think we have to not talk about it because I don't want her to feel like she's ganged up on.
Out of the loop.
It worries me at the moment, like you're filming this, because there's so much hatred now towards people that, you know, are outers. I mean, they're being absolutely vile to people, and you think, why? You know, we've all got our own opinions, and the world's a big place, you know, get on with it.
My son-in-law's a butcher, a local butcher. I'm helping him out today, just doing a few deliveries for him. I served in Staffordshire Police for 30 years. Regularly, every week I would say, at least weekly, we would have to accept maybe 10 or 15 illegal immigrants that had jumped off lorries at Hilton Services or wherever they got the opportunity to jump off the lorries, and then they'd be arrested by the traffic police officers. And I believe that a lot of people who voted Brexit thought that they were going to solve that problem by leaving Europe. But in actual fact, that problem has got nothing to do with being a member of the EU. It's illegal immigration. And do I think that there's an underlying racial hatred in this country? No, I don't. I think most people in this country are tolerant. Hello, boys.
Shame they were the only ones that voted, otherwise we might not be in this position.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Did you vote, Adam?
Yeah, well,
no, well, there
you go then.
So they're trying to make it as it was before, but without being part of the European Union.
But you can't do that.
So it's just, that's why it's impossible to strike a deal, isn't it?
I think she's done well under the circumstances. It's all right the Labour turning around and saying, well, we don't want this, we don't want that, but they've come up with no ideas.
She needs to get some back in and go for it.
The trouble is, if you got rid of Theresa May, who would you put in? Certainly I wouldn't vote for Boris Johnson.
Obviously, Europe need us as well. So Europe need us as well.
You've either got to make a strong decision and say, right, we're confident that we can go on our own, or you've got to say, no, we need Europe as much as we've done in the past.
There'll be a shortage of English meat. I mean, it's been...
It'll be exported.
Yeah. I mean, the lamb this year has been extortionately pricey because it's all been exported because they get more money for it.
Is that because of the low pound?
Yeah. Myself, little independents like me are going to have to pay more for my products that I've been buying from the local farms for years. And that's not really right, is it?
It's Chinese time. That's nice, you get it everywhere.
Likes chow mein. Any chips? Yeah, please.
What was traffic like when you run today, Dad? Was it?
Traffic was good today.
People don't feel they've got
Yeah,
any
but
input into that.
but
So
how
people
could-
are now backtracking and thinking, hold on a minute, this isn't actually what I signed
you
up for
can't-
when I thought we were going to leave.
That's the whole problem, isn't it?
But Heather, it'll be sorted.
All these issues will have
Yeah, but you can't... We've never been here before, so how can you say they're going to be sorted? Because no one knows what they're on about, do they? No one's been here to say that's what's going to happen, this is
It's
not
not
going
going
to
to
happen.
stay up in the air. One way or another.
Yeah, but it might be sorted out for good, it might be sorted out for bad.
What? Yeah, it might. But you don't know, but one way or the other, it'll be sorted.
So if it's sorted out for bad, what's the point of doing it in the first place?
There's nothing to sort.
But we want our cake and eat it, don't we?
Yeah.
We want to pay less into Europe, but still trade with Europe and the rest of the world.
So why are we leaving the EU?
I know, that's what I'm saying.
There is only the EU that you can buy stuff from.
Yeah, of course.
No, but along with the EU, you get things like maternity leave and you get paid sick leave.
We'll still get
it. Will we?
Yeah, once we're out, our Parliament will look at all those rules and regulations and laws and say, well, that doesn't apply to us anymore, rescind it.
She's got to you. She's got to you.
No, it's just accepted.
It's accepted he's wrong.
I'm still a Remainer. I want to stay in the EU. I don't believe that our government will do away with the good stuff that's been introduced.
It just feels like there's this massive cultural change that's come along with Brexit. The people that are seen to be taking over and making decisions, there's genuinely no one that I would wish to vote for because I don't identify with any of those people anymore.
I think that there's nobody good to choose from, is there?
But there's only one answer you decided now, and that's everyone's got to start with Theresa May. None of us know what the right answer is. She's doing her best, and I feel for her, whether we're Conservative, Labour, whatever you are.
Anybody want a glass of white wine? When we get going.
This is quite tame, to be honest.
Wait till we start on religion.
In a fast-moving world, keeping in touch is essential, but it shouldn't cost an arm and a leg, and it should be possible wherever you are. That's why Parliament is bringing telecoms rules up to date. MEPs want to put an end to expensive calls within the EU. From May 2019, phone calls should be capped at 19 cents and texts at just 6 cents.
In many countries of the European Union, this is going to no substantive decreasing of the cost, which is something that I'm sure the European consumers they will welcome.
It would be easier for customers to monitor their phone use and keep an eye on their bills. Remember, you're not married to your phone provider, so leaving it when you find a better deal should be easier. You could even receive compensation if they are too slow to let you go. Your personal information is precious. This is why Parliament wants to promote secure end-to-end encryption. Web-based services like Skype and WhatsApp will also be covered by the same rules. And because no one likes hanging around for slow internet connections, MEPs want super high-speed 5G to start hitting major European cities in 2020.
Yes, come along then, come along. Come along, young Wombles. Just in time for Womble TV. There we are. Come on. Now we'll just switch it on. Won't take long to warm up, I'm sure.
And when people ask me why I put myself through it, the long hours, the pressure, the criticism, the insults that inevitably go with this job, I tell them this. I do it to root out injustice and to give everyone in our country a voice. And that's why, when I reflect on my time in politics, the things that make me proud are not the positions I've held, the world leaders I've met, the great global gatherings I've attended, but knowing that I made a difference, that I helped those who couldn't be heard.
Oh, yeah. I always like that joke. Oh, what a load of rubbish.
Our goal is simple, a fairer country, for all those born here, for those who have chosen to make this their home, and for the generations yet to come. That is why we believe in an independent Scotland. So know this, believe in this, work for this. Hope is possible. A better future is within our grasp, and together we are going to make it happen.
Well, I grew up in a Scotland where the decisions about our future are taken by the people who care most about Scotland, the people who live here.
listening to Independent TV and Radio Scotland. Channel Radio ICE.
Have you ever bled rock and roll while the sharks are...
Next up is Michelle Channel, Final Swim.
Have you felt their teeth ink your skin? Wondering why you decided to swim. Seemed like a good thing at the time. Feet in the sand, no clouds in sight. Hands did the shaking, but eyes don't lie. Didn't know how high that tide would climb. Now it's coming down to the end. Take a breath for that final swim. Have you ever signed your life away to give life to the music you make? Seemed like a good deal at the time. Feet in the sand, no clouds in sight. Hands did the shaking, but eyes don't lie. Didn't know how high that tide would climb. Seemed like a good deal at the time. Feet in the sand, no clouds in sight. Hands did the shaking, but eyes don't lie. Didn't know how high that price would climb. Didn't know how high that price would climb.
Next we have Jeff Hurley, Peace of Mind.
I don't wanna hear it, I just want a little peace of mind. Candidates debating, ringing hollow as can be. Nothing that they say or do means anything to me. I can't understand it, I just want a little peace of You take coffee with your cream. You squeak like a teen. And the Hugh Grant stuff you've watched enough.
Track playing now. Josh Woodward, Perfect.
Mangle some tunes. On weekends you dance in jammy pants until the afternoon. And I know it's hard to think that someone could be in sync with all your eccentricities. You're perfect in the perfect way. You're perfect and I hope you stay. Your goofy little self eternally. Oh, I'm weird like you, I know it's true. I'm in the clouds up there with you. You think you're flawed, but wouldn't you agree? You're perfect for me. You talk to yourself and answer as well. You read ahead on Walking Dead before you watch the show. You eat bread with fur, you still call me sir. There's a piece of gum from 91 that's hiding in your purse. But no matter what I sing, I wouldn't change a thing. You're my postmodern masterpiece. You're perfect in the perfect way. You're perfect and I hope you stay. Your goofy little self eternally. Oh, I'm weird like you, I know it's true. I'm in the clouds up there with you. You think you're flawed, but wouldn't you agree? You're perfect for me. Ba, 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 ba. Your mind and mine are strangely intertwined, and that's just a-okay with me. You're perfect in the perfect way. You're perfect and I hope you stay. Your goofy little self eternally. Oh, I'm weird like you, I know it's true. I'm in the clouds up there with you. You think you're flawed, but wouldn't you agree? You're perfect for me.
Now playing. Brielle Rathbun and Colin Jeffries, Broken People.
Even just to prick up on your skin where you bleed my body scars. Flames come from sparks. Before it all burns down, I trap the sounds, keep each memory in a jar. I don't know why we try so hard to understand that some things we can't fix ourselves, they can't be mended by hand. Oh, no, we kiss, now we try to forget about who we actually love. So we just stood in regret till we both gave up, yeah. Some broken people get lost for love. A broken people, yeah. Say that love is good, but right now I'm too scared and unprepared to feel it like I should. Go take every dream. My heart goes up and down, I hit the ground, not as pretty as it seems. Oh yeah, I don't know why you try so hard to understand that some things you can't fix yourself, they can't be mended by your hands. Ooh, no, we kissed, now we try to forget. Some broken people get lost for love. Broken people stop breathing. Don't stop believing. Just keep thinking. I just wanna break. Ooh, don't stop breathing. Don't stop believing. Just keep thinking. I just wanna break. 'Cause I'm sick of breathing, sick of believing, sick of thinking. I just wanna break. I don't know why I try so hard to understand. There's some things I can't fix myself. They can't be meant my hands. Ooh, no, we kiss and we try to forget about who we actually love. So I just stood in regret till we both gave up. Broken people.
You're listening to Independent TV and Radio Scotland, Channel Radio Ice.
Next up is Low Down, Watch Your Mouth.
Check it. You can scream when you burn or just jump into the flames, 'cause I'm here to bring the heat like a tank full of propane. I step to the stage like a man with no name. I show you no shame and flow like cold rain. Show up and blow brains with the wicked metaphors. You be still trying to figure as you're stepping through the door at the end of the night. Yo, what the fuck did he say? I got notebooks of this to spit for all day and flow for always. I study it and practice, and that's what they ask if I can spit backwards. Say I net words that you can't fully listen. They figure you and do you what is pants you're pissing. Missing just the word will make you look a little closer. As Mr. Warhammer, I am a breakbeat composer. Close for many years, and this is just the latest. I roll with tirade, these fools they can't fade us. And if they try to test, they get beaten like a sadist. And those that try to play us, come on man, stop it. Suckers get afraid when I drop it. Watch them wet themselves like the pet dog pissing on the carpet. And even if I rock it off topic, I still pull your eyes out your sockets and put them in your pockets. So when you dig in to pull them out, what's up? You can raise them to your face and start watching your mouth. You watch 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 your mouth. Who the hell you think you're talking to? Tell your story walking, fool. You're fucking with the heavyweight, you better watch your mouth. Everybody's rapping, but very few is happening. Straight FMC, you need to chill like Chuck, chill out. Reusable, recyclable, retarded ass lyrical, verbal diarrhea that's holding the Pangea. I can't even see you 'cause you're transparent like glass. I wouldn't wanna be you, watch your mouth. Dumbass, everybody doing big things, always on the come up. These shows are gonna blow up, all these hoes about to hoe up. Before you get the dough up, homeboy, you need to slow up. You need to shut the fuck up, or it needs you need to grow up. So bring your fucking
fucking blows up or we'll put on the gag order. You get deported to opposite of map quarter. This one goes out to the ass with the head stuck up. Have a tall glass of shut the fuck up. MCs coming back, greedy mic grabbers. Hey, other fools is whack with all that jibber jabber. We got to get the gabber, but we ain't black delicious. So you know that I know that you know what this is. Realign your word with this hip-hop symmetry. Middle finger goes on to the player pimp imagery about making stacks and other lofty high goals. You ain't saying jack, so close your damn pie hole.
You want your mouth. 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 You want your mouth.
Next up is Michelle Channel, Waiting for You.
Miles and miles ahead, but when I look down, my eyes follow you. Can you feel my thoughts beside your head when you're walking straight ahead? You're not alone here from beyond the sunrise. I'll be waiting for you, for you. I'll be waiting for you, for you. Calling out, you say my name, though you think that I can't hear. But when I look down, I see only you. When you close your eyes to get some rest, do you know that I'm still here in this beyondness from beyond the sunrise? I'll be waiting for you, for you. I'll be waiting for you, for you. I'll be waiting.
Playing now. We is sure dedicated, Ice Cubes.
By herself on the highest shelf, slapped the widow's cell. Flashlights shook everywhere we looked, couldn't find our path. There's a body in this bed. We are afraid it's dawning. Lights are off and we better keep them on, as the darkness floods our abandoned hearts. Wake up, Cell, won't you wake up, Cell? It will be alright. Life is long, you can leave some other day when we're gray. Never mind what voices say. Keep the ice cubes in that tray. Without you there's less of us. Bell and tilt and we are dust. Never mind what voices say. Keep the ice cubes in that tray. Without you there's less of us. Bell and tilt and we are dust. Drown your anger in a fight, in a glass of pills, body thrills, anything just to keep you in the steam. Be sick, I'll pop, we'll be together ill. Never mind what voices say. Keep the ice cubes in the tray. Without you there's less of us. Balance tilt and we are dust. Never mind what voices say. Keep the ice cubes in the tray. Without you there's less of us. Bounce tilt and we are dust. Never mind what voices say. Keep the ice cubes in that tray. Without you there's less of us. Bounce tilt and we are dust.
Next up is Lost European, No Photographs.
dress. Another diamond from a holy bloody war, a victim for a mighty press. No photographs, I don't need no photographs, reminding me of what once was, what it could have been. No photographs, I don't need no photographs, reminding me of tragedy that should have been the scene. No, no, no. Why can't we ever? 'Cause if we don't, our world will burn. Victims of indifference and jealousy. Why can't we lend a hand, make the difference, take a stand, and rid this world of prejudice and eyes that no cannot see? Saw you kneeling there, afraid of all alone. A single teardrop in your eye. No cryptic message here, a simple plain headstone. Is this the way our world will die? No, no photographs. I don't need no photographs, reminding me of what once was, what it could have been. No photographs. I don't need no photographs, reminding me of tragedy that should have been foreseen. No, no photographs. I don't need photographs. I've got my mental pictures to remind me. No photographs. No more photographs. No more photographs. No
The coolest radio station in the world, Radio Ice, from Independent TV and Radio Scotland.
Track playing now. Johannes Skral, Hexxit Grave Symphony. Track playing now. Snowflake, Living Nightmare.
Poison the air. Oh, I'm wide awake, but you're my nightmare. Egocentric, narcissistic, and you won't go away. You're trumpeting hate and you don't play fair. With your arrogant ways and your comb over hair. No, you're a fake, not a billionaire. Oh no, no, I'm wide awake and you're a nightmare. Egocentric, narcissistic, and you won't go away. Lame is your game. How were your aim? You're a stranger to shame, 'cause they made you change your name. Won't take the bait in your golden snare. You're known to take more than the lion's share. Keeping my faith, not your lies and despair. Oh, I'm wide awake, but you're a living nightmare. Egocentric, narcissistic, sadly assertive, but cynic, yeah. Choked on a big dose of vitamin. Your big country is making the whole world sick. 'Cause you're oh so sadistic. You won't go away, but I won't play. Won't be your prey. Go away. Won't be your slave. Go away.
Now playing. Fox, Evil.
Wasting in between my best friend's knees, telling me that you don't wanna hurt me. And I just can't believe that any word coming off your fake lips isn't unclean. No.
better be ready, ready to roll when I pull up in front of your door.
Track playing now. J.B. Skelton, you better be ready.
I'm singing a road song and you can sing along. And oh, you better make up your mind. Today's the day I'm leaving. I'm through with empty dreaming. I'm shaking the dust from my shoes. I'm through the blues. I'm leaving this town behind. Honey, stop your crying. Stop crying and take my hand. I ain't spending 30 years dying like Papa trying. Squeeze a living on this life, this old land. Today's the day I'm leaving. I'm through with empty dreaming. I'm shaking the dust on my shoes. I'm through with the blues. I'm leaving this town behind. Too many dusty days. Too many crops to raise. There ain't no reason to stay. There's gotta be a better way. I'll end up crazy, dead in prison. But baby, if you don't go, there's one thing I want you to know. After all that we've been through, you're a part of me, and baby, I'm a part of you. So what are we waiting? What are we waiting for? Honey, climb in and close the door. Roll down the window, let down your hair. Wherever the wind blows, we'll be there. I'm singing a love song to the highway, and you're singing great harmony. Because today's the day we're leaving. We're through with empty dreaming. We're shaking the dust off our shoes. We're shaking the dust off our shoes. We're through with the blues. We're through with the blues. We're leaving this town behind.
You're listening to Independent TV and Radio Scotland. Channel Radio ICE.
Next we have Tim Beek, Chiptune Dream. Next up is Daniel Kaur and Valerie Kaur, Sail.
You always told me life was short, I should never take advantage. Now I'm standing on the shore, trying to forget this. I knew that it could happen, I just didn't think so soon. And I know that you're not there, but I can't stop texting it's so hard to continue without you. Oh, but I'll try, living every day of my life, never asking why I had to say goodbye. Oh, in this pain, nobody here's to blame. I just know you're in a better place. I'll never forget your face. Memories we shared, the kind of happiness is rare. We're gone. I'll cast my last goodbye in a bottle, give this in my song, my whole life long. Oh, but I'll try, living every day of my life, never asking why I had to say goodbye. Oh, in this pain, nobody here's to blame. I just know you're in a better place, and I'll never forget your face. Living every day of my life, why I had to say goodbye. In this pain, nobody here is to blame. I just know you're in a better place, and I'll never forget your face. Never asking why I had to say goodbye. Last goodbye in a bottle, giving see my soul, my whole life long.
Playing now. Rudy Roger, bass.